Ta-da! Welcome. Back in the studio after a 6-month hiatus. This is Off the Shelf, Books on Tour. I'm your host, Veronica Andrews. Glad to be back with you. We have a returning author with us today, Mr. Eric Jay Dolin, and this is his third time coming to us with books, and I love it. I love it. This book is Black Flags, Blue Waters. And you yourself said it's very different than anything you've written before.
Yes. Well, every book is sort of a surprise to me because I always pick topics that I don't know much about. So the entire process is like illuminating discoveries every week or two.
But you let your kids pick out this topic. I love
My
that.
kids, yeah. I had, finding a topic is always tough. But when I pitched a couple of ideas to my kids and they heard pirates, they immediately perked up and they said, you have to write a book about pirates. And my daughter even gave a title, Swords, Swashbucklers, and Trauma. And she was very excited about the book. My son was very excited. They were teenagers at the time. And that's, of course, not the only reason I decided to write the book, but it was a big part of it.
But did they read it when you were finished?
My daughter read it when it was in draft form. My son still has not read it. My kids are great readers. They're not big readers of history. And I have to admit, sadly, that of all the books I've written, 13 books, this is the only one that one of my children has read. My daughter is a college student at NYU, and she had to write a book on corsets in the 1800s. And she remembered in the back of her head that corsets were made out of baleen stays. So she called me, she goes, Dad, did your book about whaling, Leviathan, have anything about corsets? And I said, yes. So she read one chapter of that book, but then she was forced to read the entire manuscript. And she really liked this book. And
Really?
I think as they get older, they'll read some of my books.
The way that she projected it to you was, as most of us know, the swashbuckling, handsome Johnny Depp.
Yes.
And Jay, it ain't so.
No.
No,
The Hollywood romance of pirates is great to watch on the silver screen, but the reality is quite different.
So when the daughter finished it, did she wish she hadn't read it?
No, she liked it, and just like me, I know the real
Wow.
history, but I'm still happy to watch Pirates of the Caribbean. I have no problem with Hollywood making up things. That's fine. You need to know where to get your history, though. If you want to understand the true history of pirates, you don't go to Hollywood for your answers.
But, and I might get into trouble for this, what else is new? I found their behavior, the behavior of the colonists, the behavior of the crown, the different kings and queens, very similar to behavior today.
I think that's a good observation. I mean, there have always been pirates. There still are today, but in the sense that
There's always been politicians who are willing to cut them a deal.
Well, the biggest message in this book to me is that money talks louder than anything. So basically, if pirates were helping you out, if you were benefiting from pirate money and treasure and goods that they brought back, you love pirates, you welcome them. If pirates were attacking your ships and causing you economic pain, you hated them. But from that flows all sorts of manipulation, such as governors supporting pirates because they're getting kickbacks and it's helping their economy thrive. But when the pirates flip around and start attacking your merchant ships, you want them wiped from the sea. So if you want to understand the courses of history, you really need to ask, where is the money, where is it going?
Follow the money, but we hear that today, like the Virgin Queen Elizabeth. Here she signs a treaty with Spain and waves goodbye to the pirates and says, go get them when you're beyond the 12-mile limit.
Absolutely.
And then she relishes in the gold and spices and silks that they bring back, but disavows even knowing anything about it. I mean, and that happened over in Jamaica.
Yeah.
It was their really comfortable home base.
Right.
Because the pirates were so comfortable there, the politicians were protecting themselves from being attacked by the pirates because they made them welcome.
Right, absolutely. It's piracy is in the eye of the beholder, and money often makes you overlook many things that otherwise would trouble you. So it makes strange bedfellows.
Oh, I guess. And were they brutal?
Yes. Well, you know what's interesting about pirates? A lot of them were brutal. Some of them were sadistic. Some of them just seemed to enjoy inflicting pain. But what's really interesting to me is so many pirates were able to get what they want through intimidation and fear rather than having to physically assault somebody.
Just being a pirate, having the title.
Right, just being a pirate, raising the black flag, and every once in a while killing a few people sort of helped your brand as a pirate and instilled fear into those who you would attack. So it's much better for a pirate. Pirates don't want to fight because they can die, they can destroy the ship they're attacking, they can destroy the cargo. So they love it if they can intimidate you into surrender. And
I was
that's what they try to do.
surprised that you write about a contract that they actually, now they made people, they kidnapped some crew members.
Right.
They made others come aboard, and then when they get out to sea, they write a contract.
Right.
They
Pirates
elect
Code.
a captain.
Yep.
Then how much of the spoils you're going to get.
Right.
If you lose a limb, they give you an extra 600.
Yeah, they had a social security system of a sort.
And very few peg legs.
Very few peg legs. It's
Because you couldn't stand on a rocking boat with only one leg. It was hard enough on two.
Right. Yeah, they had the pirate code is fascinating. Just think of it. These pirates are a floating society, often shunned from ports. They're out in the ocean for months or years at a time, and they need to establish rules that will keep them from being at each other's necks.
You'd almost say democracy.
No, it is a form of democracy, but you can't confuse it with the democracy that people label, the American Revolution and the French Revolution, which were democracies of a sort. They weren't political philosophers. They didn't believe that all people are inherently equal. They just created a system that made for a way of life that was tenable for them, and that involved distributing the treasure fairly equally, electing the captain, and they could depose the captain. If the captain was bad, they could vote him right out.
And very few of them walked the plank.
Well, none during the Golden Age walked the plank. There were a couple of pirates in the 1800s that walked the planks, but that was more of a literary embellishment that people added later. I mean, just think about it. You want to kill somebody, why are you going to go to the trouble of making them walk a plank? Just pitch them over the side or run them through with a cutlass.
Wasn't that true of the women that were taken off of a ship and saw what was ahead for them, and they jumped over themselves rather than be raped or cut with a cutlass or abused?
Yeah, that was a particularly sad story about the pirates attacking a Mughal ship in the Indian Ocean, and there were thousands, there were like almost 1,000 Muslims on board, and many of them were viciously raped, and many of the women, rather than be treated in such a horrific manner in front of their friends and family, stabbed themselves or pitched themselves over the side. I mean, there are some really gruesome passages in the history of American piracy.
Yeah, Hollywood doesn't cover that.
No, these were not nice guys.
No.
And they were almost all guys. There were a couple of women, but they were almost all guys. Somebody asked me, would I want to have a drink with any of these pirates? And my answer was, yes, I wouldn't mind having a drink if I had a bodyguard around.
Or if they were behind bars.
Behind bars.
But as many times as they wound up behind bars, and they went through these very publicized trials, and said death by hanging, it seemed to me there were more that were pardoned before the gallows.
Yes, a lot.
Than actually, of 6, they hung 1 and pardoned 5.
Right. A lot were pardoned, and there are many reasons why they did it. Early on in the 1600s, a lot of people in the colonies especially still liked pirates because they were bringing money into the colonies. Later on, there were fewer pardons when the real war on pirates began, but there are often extenuating circumstances. Sometimes the pirate has a relative who has some power and might be able to get them off. Other times the people in charge, the government, wants to show that they're lenient to maybe get favor with the populace who might still be a little bit on the side of the pirates.
And a lot of them funded their enterprise. So if you kill him, he's not going to bring home the goods anymore. Right.
There's this one governor, Governor Fletcher of New York, who supposedly got almost 30,000 pounds, that's a huge amount in the late 1600s, in kickbacks from pirates. Every pirate that came into New York had to pay him 100 pounds to be protected and not be brought up on charges of piracy.
So when he went to be hanged, of course you'd pardon him.
Yeah.
And send him back out. Now, a lot of them would go back home. and nobody would ever know that's how they funded their fortune or started their life. But many of them would go right back to being a pirate again.
Right. I mean, a lot of pirates had short, brutish lives, and they died either at sea or being hanged. But a lot of them did settle down in the colonies and continued their life. And I bet most of them, their neighbors, probably knew where they got their money from, but it wasn't as great a concern.
They knew what they did,
Yeah.
how they got the money.
Yeah.
I was surprised, and I shouldn't be anymore. You write about Justice Samuel Sewall. Now, I'm from Woburn, Mass.
Okay.
And he wrote the history of Woburn, Mass.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was the only one we had until John McElhaney, maybe 10 years ago, rewrote it. So then I sit here and I read about Salem.
Right.
And he was in the witch trials.
Yes.
And he was in Danvers. The man was all over the place.
Yeah, he was one of the most important people in that era of colonial America, one of the richest men in the colonies, and he was involved in some things that he later felt very badly about, such as the witch trials, and he was one of the first people, he was the first major person to ever speak out against slavery in the colonies, but he also was an important jurist, so he was appointed at one time to convene a group to go after the pirate John Quelch, who left from Marblehead, came back to Marblehead, and was finally caught as a result of a manhunt. But Justice Sewall was chosen to head up that process, and his brother was a military man, and he's the one that went in search of the pirates and finally caught them off the Isle of Shoals and brought them back to justice. So Sewall, if you read anything about American history from the late 1600s to the early 1700s,
you should write the next book about him.
There have been some great books written about him. One, indeed, by one of his descendants, wrote a really good book about him.
Also, the book, there's a buccaneer, there's a rogue, and there's a pirate. Did they have a class system?
No, those are just for different eras. The buccaneers were the men who were operating in the Caribbean in the mid-1600s, and they're people like Henry Morgan, who has a rum named after him. And most of them were out-and-out pirates. They were just named buccaneers because they originally started as men who lived in Hispaniola, and they would cure meat from these wooden frames, a boucan, so they were called buccaneers. Okay. But most of them were just the equivalent of pirates. The real difference is between pirates and privateers. Privateers have a letter of marque. They have permission from a government to attack the enemies of that government during time of war. Pirates will attack any ship of any nationality usually, and they don't have any official dispensation to do that. Many people have called privateering licensed piracy, which may in fact be the case, but there is a distinction. And I write about pirates, not privateers.
But the privateers very often had 6 or 7 letters.
Yes.
So when they saw a ship approaching with a French flag, they went through their file cabinet and pulled out a French letter.
Right, a French letter or a French flag. Yeah, well, at sea, you really needed to know who you were encountering. And sometimes you wanted to fool the people you were encountering.
So that you could be a pirate when they pulled up beside you.
Right. And you could spring it on them.
No, thank you. Now, no quarter. I think we all know what no quarter means. No chance in hell.
Right.
But where did it come from, and what does it really mean, no quarter? If you don't surrender your ship, this is what the pirates would say,
right,
rather than go and kill,
right,
no quarter.
Right. Well, think about it. A pirate ship comes upon a potential victim. They raise their black flag. The victim, the ship, keeps sailing away, isn't stopping. So the pirate, to instill more fear in them even than the black flag, will raise their red flag, their bloody red flag, which is the one that indicates that no quarter will be given. So this is not good for the victim because they know that now they're really going to get it. But it's basically a way of telescoping their intentions and letting them know that you've wronged us, you've tried to escape, now we're going to hunt you down, and when we do, we're going to rip you apart, literally.
But most of the time, they would assess the ship, and
right,
if it was better than the one they were on,
yes, they move up.
They would move up, sink it.
Yes.
Sometimes they'd kill the whole crew, sometimes they'd let them go.
Right. Most of the times they'd let them go. Sometimes they would kill the whole crew. They didn't often sink the ship. I mean, that happened sometimes. They would they basically couldn't keep accumulating all these victims. Some of these pirates attack 20 or 30 merchant ships. They couldn't take all the crews from all those merchant ships on board. So many times they used the ship that they didn't want as a vehicle to transport the people they didn't want
And sell
back
them
to
as
land.
slaves.
Yeah, if they're black.
Were you surprised that there were American Indian among the slaves,
No.
among the crews?
No, not at all. I mean, at that time, I mean, there were Native Americans and American Indians actually had slaves that were other Indians, but Indians also played a very important role in our whaling industry, and there were many more of them in the late 1600s and early 1700s, and some of them got swept up as slaves or just as indentured servants or just as workers, and they ended up on pirate ships, and especially Indians from the Caribbean, as well as ones that were in the American colonies.
Didn't one of them actually reach captain status or close to it? Wasn't he he really worked his way up and earned their respect the way he carried on?
Not reaching captain status, but some of them, both blacks that were former slaves and some that were not, were respected crewmen on many pirate ships. Some were treated as slaves and resold, but the same for Native Americans. Some of them were treated sort of as chattel. Others became respected members of the crew. It really depended on what the pirates needed, whether they needed the manpower and their own disposition. But it's not true that black men in particular were treated with equality across the board on pirate ships. Some of them were, but many of them were just used as a means to earn money by selling them.
The equivalent was with the white people that they kidnapped.
Right, the exact
and brought
same
aboard.
thing. Yeah, going on the account and forcing people, forced men. It was horrible. If you were a victim, if you were on a ship, you were taken over by pirates and they needed more crew members. Sometimes they would force men on board the ship.
With a hammer to the head, as I remember.
Right, yeah. One guy was threatened to be...
But he was a cooper?
He was a cooper.
No,
so
a cooper means the equivalent of a blacksmith.
No, carpenter.
Carpenter.
More like the carpenter, the guy that would do all the carpentry on board. And yes, he was mortified that he was forced to become a pirate because who knows what your end might be. But a lot of men who were forced, what happened is the other men on their ship that weren't forced, that went back to port, would post advertisements in a local newspaper saying that so-and-so was forced to become a pirate, the hope being that if he was ever caught, that pirate ship was ever caught,
he would get a pardon.
He would get a pardon or there'd be extenuating circumstances. So it's an amazing era, amazing time.
And Cotton Mather showed up in the middle of it every time you turn the page.
Cotton Mather, one of the most famous people in the colonies, Puritan minister. Yes, he made a sort of a cottage industry of showing up at piracy trials and trying to cause pirates to repent. And he would use them as objects in his sermons. He would sometimes haul the pirates into his church and deliver sermons to his broader parishioners, but also to the pirates. So he became quite cocky towards the end of his life. He said that pirates fear me the most, but they also call on me the most when they're in jail.
Reminds me of someone we know in this country with a very high office.
Okay, well, my book stopped in 1726.
No, but I continually saw parallels throughout with different circumstances of our own lives.
Yes.
And, nothing much has changed. I don't think we're quite as gory, but what do I know? That book hasn't been written yet. Did anything surprise you?
The thing that surprised me the most, and the thing that I knew the least about, was how pirates were such an integral part of the American colonies for about 20 or 30 years at the end of the 1600s. That just fascinated me, the close relationship between the colonists, the governors, and the pirates, and the way in which the colonists thumbed their nose at the mother country. Basically, the mother country didn't like pirates. They wanted them to be tried, the crown and the parliament. But the colonists said, no, these are our relatives. These people are bringing money to us. You, the mother country, are starving us of resources.
And trying to take all the money they're bringing.
Yeah, so we're going to protect them. So it was almost a foreshadowing of the American Revolution to some extent, because it showed that the colonists were willing to stand up to the mother country if their interests were involved.
Mm-hmm. You have a degree from Brown, from Yale, and from MIT.
Yes.
Environmental policy.
Yeah, and biology, yeah.
Do you do a job, or do you just write these books 24/7?
Now I just write books. I've been a full-time writer for about 11 years,
Okay.
but I worked for many years in a whole bunch of jobs, but I've been fortunate enough to be a full-time writer, mainly with the support of my wife and the support of readers who actually buy my books.
Mm-hmm. And what's your process? Up in the morning and at the computer by 9, or?
Oh, I'm usually at the computer before then. I mean, it varies. There's some days where I don't write at all. But a typical day, I'll probably be at the computer by 7:30 at the latest, sometimes earlier. I'm an early riser, and I'll work throughout most of the day. Now that both of my kids are in college, I have more freedom. I used to have to pick them up after school and do other things. But there's no absolutely typical day, because some days the writing goes really well, the research, and I'll work for 8 or 9 hours. Other days it's not going well, and I'll keep finding excuses and reasons to procrastinate.
Batting your head against the wall sometimes hurts.
Yes.
And it's just time to get up and get out. Now, it's 379 pages. In
Yes.
the reference material in the back, thank you very much, because you used bigger words this time than you did in the other books, and I had to look them up. But they were. It was explained in the back of the book.
Uh-huh.
And the index and the references are all there. How many pages did you turn in the original manuscript before your editors got it? Do you know?
Actually, I've become better at that over time. This is my 5th book with W.W. Norton, the Live Right imprint. And like for Leviathan, I had to cut out 30,000 words from beginning to end. For this book, I probably only cut out maybe 5,000 words from the original manuscript to what you see.
But that's got to be
you.
painful, because you sweated out those 5,000 words.
It's painful, but it's made easier by the fact that if I see that by cutting words, it makes the book more exciting and hold together better, then I'm fine with it. Sometimes it's hard to cut, though.
Yeah, I know. Well, we're going to cut away.
Okay.
And we're going to have you read us a passage. And I don't know how you got it all into 379 pages.
Luck and experience.
Hard work. So you're going to pick out a passage to
Okay.
read for our viewers, and we're going to be off for a minute.
I'm going to read a passage about Pirate Edward Lowe, one of the most sadistic pirates to ever sail the Atlantic. The loss of the Ranger and half of his pirate force incensed Lowe and only fueled his brutal and sadistic tendencies. 2 days after eluding the Greyhound, Lowe happened upon a Nantucket whaling sloop about 80 miles from land, captained by Nathan Skiff. The pirates boarded the sloop, whipped Skiff about the deck, and in what was becoming Lowe's signature move, cut off both his ears. After they had wearied themselves with making a game and sport of the poor man, they told him that because he was a good master, he should have an easy death, and then shot him through the head. Sated, Lowe took a boy and 2 Indians with him, and ordered the 3 other men aboard to sink the sloop, and then told them to take the whaleboat and go about their business. Next, Lowe captured 2 vessels out of Plymouth, Massachusetts, barbarously killing both of the captains. One was scalped and had his chest cut open to get at his heart, which the pirates roasted and then forced one of his crewmen to eat. The pirates next set upon the other captain, slashing and mauling him, and then cut off his ears and roasted them before making him consume his own flesh. So horrific were these injuries that the man soon died. Ominously, Lowe told one of his survivors he would do the like to all he meets. Lowe's rampage continued a few weeks later off the coast of Nova Scotia, where he reportedly plundered upward of 40 French fishing vessels and slashed the faces, slit the nostrils, and cut off the ears and noses of his victims. When Lowe seized casks of wine and brandy from one of the vessels, its captain asked if he would be so kind as to write a sentence or two stating that he had taken the liquor, so that the owners wouldn't think that the captain had dishonestly sold it and pocketed the profits. Lowe cheerily agreed and said that he would be right back with what the man requested. A few minutes later, Lowe returned with 2 loaded pistols, and presenting one at the captain's bowels, he told the petrified man that this one was for his wine, and discharged it. And then he pointed the other pistol at the captain's head, saying, "This one is for your brandy," and fired.
they don't show that on Johnny Depp.
No.
I mean, it certainly takes away all the mystique and all the romance. That's why I
Right.
asked if your daughter still liked Pirates after she read it, because
Yeah.
you certainly took everything away. The one thing I couldn't go back and reference, and I thought was fascinating, I think it sunk, was a ship where the captain thought he was smarter than the pirates.
Oh,
And
and
he
he
took the ballast out, and he used silver and gold for ballast on the ship. And it went down. They
Right.
didn't get it.
No, that's not. Oh no, you're talking. The Witta had silver and gold and went down in a storm. But there was a pirate. There was a ship that had silver in amongst the ballast. But the pirates threatened the guy, the captain,
And he
the
told-
captain finally told him that that's where I was hiding it.
Okay, so now we have to wrap this up, unfortunately, which we could go on for another hour. But the Whittaker, like you said, that one's off of Massachusetts.
Yeah, that's
And that one we've heard so much about.
right. The Witta is the only authenticated pirate ship and treasure ever found. It sank off of Wellfleet, Eastham area in 1717, and it was only rediscovered, the treasure, in 1984 by the salvager Barry Clifford. And now if you go out to West Yarmouth on the Cape, you can go to the Witta Pirate Museum, which is really a wonderful
Well, anybody
museum.
who ever wanted to know more about it need only read your book. And they will know just about everything they need to know, even to the point that the man who discovered it has not received royalties or anything. He's kept it in the museum for history,
Right, yeah.
which is great. What are you going to do next?
It's very appropriate that you ask me that on this day as Hurricane Florence is pounding the Carolinas. I am currently working on a book on the history of hurricanes in America.
Just on the Eastern Seaboard?
I mean, I'll talk about Hawaii a little bit, but mainly that's where they most impact, on the Eastern Seaboard and the Gulf of Mexico.
They're mean, nasty things.
They are, but they make for great stories.
Well, I think everybody can tell a story. And I heard an interesting comment before I come in on the news. Don't ask your insurance agent if you're covered. Ask him what you're not covered for.
Right.
Because unfortunately, people think, I have insurance, and they find out they don't. They don't have
Right.
flood insurance, and
Oh,
it's
devastating.
devastating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking all the mystique out of piracy and for laughing at my funny hat.
Oh, thank you.
Good to have you come back, and promise you'll come back with hurricanes?
Yes.
Same time next year? Are you going to turn one out every year?
No, it's every 2 years. So you have to wait a little longer.
Fooey. That's it for now. Off the Shelf Books on Tour. Great book.
Okay.
Black Flags,
Blue water.
Blue Waters. Mr. Eric Jay Dolin. Bye.